But let's get into it. So the purpose of today, so a few weeks ago, I had this post that went kind of viral talking about executive summaries. For any of you that I know personally, you know this is a big part of playbook that we built at Levelset, and I've helped a bunch of other companies implement something very similar to that playbook. And the the thing about executive summaries is that it's all about coaching your champion. And so I wanted to expand on this idea of how to coach your champion and how to put the executive summary to work. And so that's the purpose of today. We have a bunch of content to get through in 30 minutes. So I'm going to dive in. You'll get a copy of this slideshow, I think, or I'll figure out a way to get it to you. But if not, you can always reach out to me at Martin Roth on Twitter or martin@martinroth.com. I'm pretty easy to get in touch with. Cool. Let's get into it. So I like to start with a bit of a problem statement. Sorry, let me go to the next slide here. The problem statement is this: deals get won or lost in meetings that you don't even get to be a part of. And what I mean by that is, you're working with a prospect or working with a champion, you get really into understanding their problems, you get them very excited about it. But like most of you know, when you're selling, if you're not connected to the economic buyer and they're not involved in the sales process, which happens often in complex deals whenever you're going after enterprise sales, when you don't have direct access to the economic buyer, the company's meeting and talking about your product or service, and you're not even in the room. Even if you do have access to the economic buyer, there's still meetings that happen that you don't get to be a part of. And so it's really difficult to control what happens in those meetings. And we have to influence our champion if we want to put ourselves in the best position to close the deal. So that's what all of this is about: is how do you coach your champion? How do you prepare them and get them into a place where they can accurately describe the purpose of why they're evaluating your product or service, and also what the positive outcome is that they're gonna experience whenever they switch. So a couple of things to acknowledge about your champion. Usually they don't buy software very often, especially in vertical SaaS, selling into contractors like what we did. They don't buy software ever. And so they don't have a process for how to do it. Even if they do, they're just not very good at it because that's not their core competency. It's not, there is no sophisticated procurement process. They just don't do this very often. And so they don't have a process. That's our job as salespeople. Look, if every prospective customer had a perfect evaluation process and we had perfect information on our websites, then you wouldn't need salespeople because the buying process would be perfect. But as we all know, that's not how it normally works. And so that's why we have to create tools and playbooks for how to educate and organize the dysfunctional buying group that's on the other side of the other side of the evaluation. Okay. Speaking of dysfunctional buying groups, this is from it's from this book called Major Account Sales Strategy. It's by if you've ever read Spin Selling, that's like a popular sales book. Same author, it's got Neil Rackham. And I like this visual because it shows like any evaluation kind of follows the same process. You start at business as usual or whatever your status quo is, and that status quo changes over time until you recognize a need. And then you evaluate options and you resolve concerns, and then you make a decision, and then you implement, and then you have a new status quo. And the thing to acknowledge, the joke I make about this is that anytime you have two or more people involved in a purchase decision, you have a dysfunctional buying group. And if you need any evidence, for any of you in the audience that have a significant other, go try to make a decision with your spouse on anything, like where to eat for dinner. You have two people who live together who are imperfect at sharing information with each other. We'll now introduce all of the workplace politics and workplace conflict and rivalries and all kinds of other things that you might not even know about within that organization. All those things are present. And so when you think about, look at these two green dots, or I guess I should do like this. These two green dots, let's imagine that the dot on the bottom left is your champion, and you get that champion all the way through recognizing needs and get to evaluation of options. And then they go into a meeting with the CEO, who's the economic buyer, who ultimately signs off on the purchase. Well, that person is all the way up at they're at status quo. They haven't even recognized that they have a need, right? There are different parts of the buying process. It is really difficult to move a deal forward if you have stakeholders that are at different parts of the buying process. So when you think about what our actual job is, once we've convinced that champion that we are the right solution for their business, then the entire function of the salesperson changes, where we have to get on the same side of the table with them and help them get the purchase approved. Right? Another way to look at this is this. I talk about this all the time. The stages of awareness. This is from the Breakthrough Advertising book by Eugene Schwartz. But it's this idea that everybody in every purchase decision goes through these 5 stages where they are unaware that they even have a problem. Then they have to go from unaware to being aware that they have a problem, then looking at all of the available solutions to solve that problem. And then they look at your product, which is one of the available solutions to solve the problem that they have, and then they make a purchase, right? You can't really skip steps in this evaluation. You have to go through the stages. I'll give you a great example. If any of you have ever gotten on like a second or third demo with a prospect, and there's a new person that joins the demo, maybe a CFO or an executive, because they want to see the product. And you make the mistake, or at least I've made the mistake, where you get in on that second or third demo and you immediately jump into the product. You continue the conversation from the last time you met. And that person, the new entrant into the conversation, they don't have any of the context. They're unaware. They don't even realize that they have a problem. And you're talking about bells and whistles inside your product. You have to educate them. You have to bring them along. So the better way to go about that second or third demo is restate what are the current challenges in the business? What are the desired outcomes? Make sure you have alignment with everybody on that call, right? Best way to do that is with an executive summary. We'll get to that later. But the idea is you have to always be mindful of every single person involved in the buying process. Where are they at on the awareness spectrum? And how much do they know or care that this problem needs to be solved, right? Here's a really good way to think about it. This is an example of a misaligned buying group. You have a champion who's all the way over at product aware, right? And you have a CFO that maybe understands that there's a problem, but hasn't really spent the time to evaluate the different solutions to solve the problem. And then you have a CEO and a VP of operations who are involved in the implementation or the evaluation or consideration of buying your product. And they're unaware. They don't even realize that there's a problem. So imagine what happens whenever they have their Monday leadership executive team meeting and your champion goes to that meeting and says, we want to spend whatever your price point is. We want to spend $50,000 on buying this product. Every single other person in that meeting is going, wait, hold on. What? We're spending $50,000 on what? To solve what problem? We don't have a problem with that. It's misaligned. The goal for every one of us, founders, salespeople, we should all try to get all of the stakeholders involved and on the same stage of the awareness spectrum whenever we're working with our champion and working with a buying group. This would be a functional buying group, not a dysfunctional buying group. This is obviously like an ideal state. It would be wonderful if you could do this every time. Really tough to do, but this is as long as we communicate with our champion about it and we're honest about our efforts to try to get them aligned, then it becomes more likely. So just be aware, this is what you're working against whenever you're selling enterprise deals, is that there's a lot of coordination and communication that has to happen on their side. And if we can insert ourselves in that process, then it's more likely that we can steer them toward a decision, right? Even if that decision is no. Like, by the way, let's acknowledge it's okay if they decide not to use your product. I mean, we would prefer that they become customers, but what we don't want is we don't want this to just linger on and be a run-on opportunity that never gets to an end state where they never really make a decision. So something to keep in mind is getting an aligned functional buying group by getting everybody in the same stage of awareness. So when you think about coaching your champion, there's really 3 jobs. The first thing is you have to find the champion, right? And that is a little tricky because you have to find someone who, has the clout, has the influence, cares enough. And that's most of our work in discovery and even those first demos, really important to just find the person who would be the champion. Then we have to confirm the champion. we'll revisit how to do that. If you've been on any of the past workshops I've done, there's one way to do it, in my opinion. And then the last thing is we have to coach the champion. And that's really where we'll get into the executive summary and the business case. If you don't have a champion, you kind of don't have a deal. I mean, you may be able to close deals without having a champion, but I would say that's the exception. We should always manage to the average and expect that if we haven't found a champion, somebody that's going to advocate for and recommend that the company buy our product, then it's unlikely we're going to win that deal. You really got to get them to say it. It's almost like the exit row in the airplane where they're like, we need verbal confirmation that you're willing to assist in the event of an evacuation. We need them to confirm verbally that they're going to recommend, right? And so let's get into what is a champion and what a champion will do for you. So some of the character, I'm not going to read through all of this, but this is somebody who's obviously interested and believes that your product will make an impact on their work and their life. Like it's going to make their life easier. It's going to make the company more money. It's going to make them look good. Remember that people buy for emotional reasons. They justify their purchase for rational reasons or rational impact. So a champion is someone who's going to fight through the internal politics. They're going to represent us in meetings when we're not there. They're going to coach us on how to navigate the organization. Some other things that they will do. They're going to push your product through resistance. They're going to advocate. They're going to take personal ownership of making sure the partnership is successful. Champion really does, like even after the purchase, they have to live with it for 3, 6, 9 months because every consecutive internal meeting they have, they're kind of reasserting the decision to buy your product to make sure that it's successful because they want the emotional outcome, which is they were the champion to buy your product, implement it, and that was a positive outcome for the business and they want to win, right? So think about that whenever you're engaging in a conversation, the first or second conversation you have with a prospect, you're constantly trying to figure out, okay, is this a champion? Can I get them to a place where they're willing to do these things and advocate? And go fight through all of the internal resistance that they're going to get. Because what's true about every complex enterprise deal is that people, they don't want to change. Organizations don't want to change. And so that's the role of the champion. And our role as a salesperson or a founder is to be the champion support, get on the same side of the table with them and help them get the purchase approved, right? So I talked about confirming champions. Commit this to memory, copy it, write it down, use it today in your conversation. Once you've shown enough of the product and understand enough about their current challenges and what the desired outcome is that they're trying to get, we have to ask, are you going to recommend that your company buy our product today? And you're probably going to get a no, and that's okay. You can work through the objections. But the point is, we are asking them for something that they absolutely have control over, which is, will they give their recommendation? So you have to confirm the champion. Once you found a champion, you have to confirm that they are a champion, and then you can get into coaching the champion. And the best way to do that is to align using an executive summary or business case. So I've said this before, you have to get on the same side of the table as your champion and work with them to navigate their own organizational dysfunction so that they can get to a decision quickly. We want the decision to be yes. That's the best case scenario for us. But even if that decision is no, we just want to arrive at that decision quickly so we don't have false hope in our pipeline and think that customers are going to be customers when they're really not. Or that we're betting on a champion who doesn't really have the influence to get the deal approved, right? So that's something else to look out for. For today, I thought it would be helpful. So like some of the feedback I've gotten from that exec summary template, which I know many of you downloaded, is that it's like a little too generic, it's a template, like it's meant to be generic. It's really just meant to spell out the different sections. I wanted to give you an example of an executive summary that we use, that I've used. I redacted the company that we sent this to and some of the other details, but this was like a $140,000 deal. This is it. Like copied and pasted. This is the exact summary we used to close a $140,000 deal. And I just want to go through section by section how to create this document. And I want to point out, like bigger deals, you want it to actually be a document that you prepare with them in Microsoft Word or Google Docs. If it's a smaller deal, it's okay to put this in an email, right? It can be short, it can be summarized. But it doesn't matter how big or small the deal is, you should always prepare a business case and a summary that follows a similar structure to get alignment with either the customer or with your champion or whoever else is involved, right? It's really, really great habit to be in on every single one of the opportunities. It also gives you clarity in how you're describing this partnership. It makes your sale better because you're really thinking clearly about the impact and outcome that they're going to experience after they buy your product. So let's walk through what are the actual sections of the executive summary. Starts with a partnership description. That one's really simple. It's 2 to 3 sentences that outlines why they're even evaluating your product in the first place. Then you get into key stakeholders, all of the people involved in the decision or evaluation, the current challenges that the customer is experiencing, the desired outcomes. So what happens whenever all of their problems are solved, right? What is the positive impact on the business? Why your company and why your product is the right solution. Um, and then next is what's the estimated annual expense? What are the commercial terms? And then finally, what's the return on investment that they should expect after they make the purchase? So let's get into it. And we'll go quick. There's a lot of words here, but I just want to illustrate for you what it looks like to have an effective executive summary. Basically, I want you to understand it doesn't have to be that formal. In fact, it's better if it's not that formal because it should be co-authored with your champion. You're using their words and putting that in the document. And so here's an example. Sorry, a few more things. It's a working document. You do it with your champion, and the best case scenario is that you're updating this weekly as you're meeting with that champion and pushing the evaluation forward. We're not going to talk about mutual action plans or closing plans. But if you're already using those in your sales process, you should have consecutive meetings with your champion, kind of quarterbacking the process. And this is a great document to pull up every time, literally screen share and make sure that it is aligned. And if you have any new information between that meeting and the last meeting you had, well, you add that and you adjust the executive summary to make sure the business case is completely accurate every single time you're talking with the champion. Okay. This works because, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, it works because it directs the rational mind for what's the clear reasons to buy. It motivates the emotional mind for the champion, right? And it makes them look good, right? How awesome does it look when your champion rolls into an exec meeting to go get approval, or to get the final stamp for buying your product, and they've already done this work to prepare the business case? They look like a pro, and you make them look like a pro, right? And then the final thing is it shapes the path. It shows exactly what happens and how to get to a decision and what's going to happen with the business once it's implemented. So it makes everybody involved more prepared and more successful whenever you co-author this with your champion. All right, let's look back at that executive summary we put together. So this is a pretty big deal. The reason it was like this company was part of a portfolio of 50 other companies, and if we landed this logo, we kind of got permission to go get into a bunch of those other logos that were part of like a conglomerate or kind of like a roll up of a bunch of companies. And so this one deal was 140,000 or so, but it represented a much, much larger opportunity. And so here is, this is Levelset. So it's about construction lien rights management. We won't get too into what Levelset's product is, but this is a summary. It's really short and sweet, one sentence at the top. And then we got into who the stakeholders were. So you can see, we had on their side, we had a VP, we had the champ, which is the credit manager, we had the CFO. The CFO was our economic buyer. And then we had me, John, and Michael from my team who were working on this deal. I don't know if they know that their names are on here, but it's okay. They're homies. They will be. They're cool with being on here. And if you are interested, they'll vouch for this process because I know both of them still use this process in whenever they're selling. So once you have key stakeholders, then you get into current challenges. This is maybe the most important part of the executive summary. If you're really clear on what the problem is and why it's a problem and how it's impacting the business, then it makes the business case, it kind of writes itself, because the current challenges section tees up the next section, which is the desired outcomes section. The desired outcome section it can be point for point, bullet for bullet. If this is a current challenge, here's the desired outcome and what the impact on the business is what's the positive outcome that they will experience as a result of addressing the challenge that they're experiencing, right? So current challenges, desired outcomes. I like to describe desired outcomes as the city on the hill, right? Off in the distance that has all of their problems solved. And our job as salespeople is to convince the prospect to get in the car with us and let us drive them to the city on the hill over there, right? It's kind of a goofy illustration. But the point is, we really need to be clear about current challenges and desired outcome. If we get those two things right, then we're in a really great spot to earn the business with the company that we're trying to work with. And then we have the more specifics around why your company or product are the right solution. This probably a little larger than what I would expect. Like larger as in too many bullet points. You don't want to water it down too much. You want to have only the points that are super relevant for solving the challenges and delivering desired outcomes. This isn't not it's not a great place to put like testimonials or pocket stories. You really just want to outline in a factual way what are the exact and most important things that they need to know about your product or your company that make you the right solution relative to all of the other options that are out there. Okay. Once you've got that clear, then you can get into commercial terms. The pricing here doesn't really matter. What matters is that you spell out the why behind the price. Like you wouldn't just want to put $140,000 total. You want to kind of start to break down what would be included in a proposal so that they can wrap their mind around why you charge, how you charge, and how they consume your product financially. And so make sure that it's spelled out perfectly clearly in the commercial terms section. And then finally, you have to finish with the estimated return on investment. The best version of an estimated ROI section has numbers. I'd give myself like a C minus on this executive summary because we don't have any specific numbers. Like I would probably, if I would make this perfect, I would change the DSO decreases and actually have a DSO target. I'd have an estimate for reduced labor costs as a result of automating some of the things that we would automate. So you can definitely turn the screws and get really specific on the ROI section. And it's not about look, ROI is always tricky because you're doing your best to try to get a window into the expenses or the opportunities in their business. And you're not really held accountable to the numbers here. If we're just being honest about the estimated ROI, but it is important to get aligned with the champion to like dream with them on what is the desired outcome. Let's put a realistic expectation for what we think the business impact will be from a dollars and cents perspective. And if you do that, like, and you try your best to be accurate, it's usually directionally right. And it should be that the value you deliver is much, much more than the price that you're charging them. So that's the last section. Have a really tight expected return on investment. And once you have that business case together, that's it. Send it to them as an attachment to an email and watch how that document grows legs and walks around their organization and educates people on why they're evaluating your product in the first place, right? So how do you actually bring this up? I wanted to give you some language on something you could do this afternoon with any of your opportunities in pipeline. You can steal this word for word. Something we do with every partnership is prepare an executive summary that outlines the business case. Can we find time to walk through this business case together? Most champions will say yes. And 30 minutes together beats hours and hours of back and forth on email and however else you're communicating with them. So copy and paste this, use it, make it your own, but just ask. Most are willing to sit down and walk through it with you. And if they're not, then it's kind of a red flag that they're not serious about evaluating your product or service, right? The other thing is you want to revisit this week. You want to revisit it weekly, excuse me. And it should be in line with what your closing plan is or what your mutual action plan is. Every time you get on the call with your champion, you should be setting up a next step in the future. And if you don't have a next step, or if a deal goes a little cold, or maybe they've ghosted you on a couple of calls, that's not a great sign. But one way to re-engage is you go back to this language. Hey, we want to make sure that this business case is lined up well and represents how you're evaluating this partnership. Can we get on the phone and walk through it together to make sure that we have it right? By the way, it also helps your team Your CS team and the implementation team, they love this executive summary because it it tells them exactly what's most important for guiding the implementation and what value we need to show to the customer whenever they're live, right? So it's not just for them, it's also for your team. So stay engaged by meeting weekly with the champion. Use this weekly meeting as an opportunity to make sure the executive summary is accurate and listen for those subtle hints that they might not be moving forward, right? Anytime you feel them pulling back, it's a great time to say, hey, look, based on our last few conversations, it seems like this isn't as high of a priority. I want to make sure that we're aligning our resources with your intention to move forward. Whatever your language is, but we should always be listening for what's the truth. Like, what are they actually going to move forward with us? Are they advocating? Are they going to recommend? Or are they kind of leaning away? Right. And this is a great touch point for you to collaborate with them on why you should be meeting every single week. And kind of mentioned this a minute ago, if they don't help, like if they're not willing to sit down and co-author this executive summary with you, then they're probably not serious about evaluating your solution. Or maybe they don't have enough influence to make an impact, right? Either one of those we should be listening for so that we don't have a bunch of not great deals in the pipeline and we're not wasting time on people that aren't serious about buying. So whenever we're coaching our champ, and this is in summary, we'll wrap up here. You're teaching them how to navigate their own buying process. You're giving them language to defend their decision whenever they're amongst their peers or with the executive team. And we're preparing them for any objections that they might face. And what happens usually is that whenever they get internal resistance, if we encourage them, they bring those folks into the conversation so we can help our champion win those people over. And by win them over, all we're doing is getting them to move from unaware to problem aware to solution aware to product aware. We're just trying to get people further along in the awareness spectrum so that they're better prepared to make a decision, right? And in the best scenario, you invite all of those people into the conversation. That's how you get alignment in the biggest and most complex deals. But even in small deals, even if you have only two people involved, it's important to get alignment. If you want to guarantee that this does not work, this is what you would do. You would write it alone, your executive summary, and you'd send it by email without ever talking to your champion about it. You would use your language, your vernacular, instead of the customer's language, right? You would make it formal, like a proposal, and they're going to feel like, oh, is this something I need to sign? And you would create it once and you'd never update it, right? If you do these four things, it is bound to fail, right? So instead, do the opposite. Write it with your champion, use their language, make it informal and casual, and update it as often as you can, like, reasonably update it. You're not going to do it every day, but once a week, have that cadence with your champion to make sure that it's updated. So if you want to put this to work, set a threshold. Every deal over $25,000 in ARR needs to have an executive summary and PDF attached to the opportunity in your CRM. Every rep has to use some form of this business case on every deal, and you have to use your CRM to track it. That's the best way to put it to work. So here's what I want you to do this week. Pick your biggest open opportunity, call the champion and schedule 30 minutes with the champion and build an executive summary with the champion. And if you need feedback, reach out to me. I'll give you feedback on your executive summary, but try to do this with your biggest opportunity or any opportunity where you can get a champ to participate. Here's the four things I want you to remember. If you remember nothing else from this conversation, your customer does not know how to buy your product. They're probably out of practice if they do it, if they've ever done it at all. Deals close in meetings that you're not allowed to be a part of. And using this executive summary allows you to have a voice in that meeting. The executive summary is the best coaching tool for your champion. It allows you to align with them if you're co-authoring it with them. And co-author and revisit it weekly. And if you do these four things, that you're doing exactly what's needed to coach your champion so that they can make a faster decision. And that's it. I have a giveaway for you. If you want the playbook we used to scale Levelset up through 20 million, closed bunch of deals. I call it the 4 keys. It's here at martinroth.com/4 keys. And finally, if you want to work with us, this is what we do. We help companies go from 3 million through 20 million. We mostly work with vertical SaaS companies, and if you need help, reach out, martin@martinroth.com. Thank you all. And if you have questions, email me. We're not going to do a Q&A because it's 1:31 or 2:31, wherever you are in the world. And I just appreciate y'all showing up. Thank you very much. Have a great day.